I, 46M, got into a fight with my wife, 43F, after I tried to convince her that my son's anxiety wasn't a personal attack. My, 46M, wife, 43F, was feeling frustrated at our son, 16M, at the supper table. They had just had a bit of a fight, and he was feeling frightened and anxious. He kept nervously tapping at his plate while eating. My wife hates noise, and this was sending her over the edge. She asks him to stop. He does not. He becomes more agitated, prompting more tapping, and my wife declares that she will no longer be able to eat dinner with the rest of the family. Why is that? I ask. Because he won't stop this. He will never stop this, even after I ask him to. It's so disrespectful, she replies. It takes a while to calm down. He's feeling anxiety about your fight, and now more anxiety about this interaction, and it's going to take him time to calm down. Suggest. But he keeps doing this. He knows I don't like the noise, and I think he has to be doing it on purpose, she says. It's a tic. He's not entirely in control right now. Recall the half-life of the autonomic nervous system. You can't just turn off emotion like that, I say. She reasserts that it's a conscious act of disrespect. Since she's asked him to stop, and he does not, then it's a personal attack. I try to point out that even though she's taking it personally, that it's not actually personal. I try an analogy. And this is when the fight started. Imagine the shoe is on the other foot, and I told you that you should just stop feeling your anxiety and get it under control. How would that make you feel? This is like that for him. He can't just stop on command. She can't believe I said this. She has a diagnosis for anxiety, and our son does not, so this is completely different. That I would be so insensitive to say that I think her anxiety is pretend, and that she can just snap out of it at any time. I didn't say that, but that's clearly how it landed for her. Am I crazy? Gave context. I presented it as a hypothetical exercise in empathy. But she insists that I'm the problem. That I'm always saying things that are hurtful and belittling, and this is just one more example in the line of awful things I've said to her. Yet another example that confirms for her that I'm autistic and our communication is fundamentally broken. Maybe I am, because I legitimately think I'm losing my grip on reality when she asserts that most people would take offense at what I said to her when I asked her to imagine what it would feel like if the shoe was on the other foot. I understand that she did, in fact, find it hurtful. But I also think that she is almost willfully missing the context. I don't believe I would have found it offensive had a friend said it to me. And I fully acknowledge that our communication is fundamentally broken. So this is what it comes to. I need a sanity check. Put yourself in these shoes and please tell me how bad I fucked up. Would you have been offended by my question? Too long didn't read. I'm having trouble communicating with my wife, and I want to know how offensive the internet thinks I was given the context. Edit on a suggestion so people don't think my kid is being a shitty teenager. When he's upset, he gets into these cognitive behavioral loops, repeated phrases, physical motions, that sort of thing. A small for instance, he'll start scratching himself until he makes his skin raw. You can physically hold his hands, rub out his fingers, speak softly to him, and that helps about half the time. The other half, he just starts tapping his foot or rubbing his face to his shoulder or something else. He gets into these loops when he gets into trouble, or more often lately, when he thinks he's going to get into trouble. And then the negative reinforcement begins. I'm trying to help him find other internal ways to soothe. Obviously these patterns aren't going to serve him well in the greater social arena or at a workplace, but it's hard to reason with an emotional overload. I'm trying to get him help for this, but I live in a country where it's terribly difficult to get a child a mental health diagnosis. So it's just me, researching my head off and trying to be a stable dad for him. It might be helpful to get your son to speak to a mental health professional, not just for a screening, but so that he can learn to contextualize and cope with both his own anxiety and his mother's. You chased your wife down a rabbit hole here. It wasn't a productive conversation. You might want to avoid analogies and metaphors with her, especially when she is anxious or upset. They are inherently flawed, and people who want to take offense will find a way to take offense. Instead, refocus on the fact that everyone feels anxiety and is impacted by it, regardless of a formal diagnosis. She needs to make allowances and offer some respect for her son when he's upset or anxious, even if he doesn't have a disorder. You don't need a formal diagnosis to sometimes have anxiety or depression or grief impact you in large, difficult to manage ways. Your wife needs to do better at recognizing her son's limitations as well as her own. She needs to be able to consider the fact she was pushed past her limits, doesn't mean other people have necessarily done something wrong or deliberate. Edit. Also, if your wife's solution to her own unhappiness and anxiety is to remove herself, let her remove herself. Don't get into fights about intent/punishment when she's trying to exit the situation that is making her unhappy. Let her cool down for a while too before asking her to look at the situation more clearly. Honestly, it sounds like on this specific night, everyone should have just gone to their own corners to eat and you could come back together at some point tomorrow. Was all this discussed in front of your son? Because if so, no wonder he has anxiety, and that's more concerning to me than the marital issues. I'm just going to say I think you need to do more thinking and research and possibly discussion with an actual therapist or counselor about how to de-escalate an emotional situation. Recall the half-life of the nervous system is not a winner here for actually calming anxiety and soothing emotions. You just kept trying to problem solve everything instead of actually handling all the emotions at the table. The first step of which would have been validating everyone's emotions instead of arguing with someone about what they're feeling, whether it's rational or not. I'm not saying handling such a thing is easy, but you definitely didn't handle it well. Imagine the shoe is on the other foot, and I told you that you should just stop feeling your anxiety and get it under control. How would that make you feel? This is like that for him. He can't just stop on command. Emotions are not the same thing as behavior. This is like saying I can't stop hitting you because I'm so angry. I'm not saying that tapping a plate is wrong in the same way, but your argument is unsound. It's a tick. He's not entirely in control right now. Recall the half-life of the autonomic nervous system. You can't just turn off emotion like that, I say. If your son has a tick that he truly cannot control, he needs to get a diagnosis and treatment for whatever's going on with him. My wife, 25, and Mill, 55, argue for hours a day and it's ruining our relationship. My wife and Mill operate a business together. When my wife is home, she's typically on the phone with her mother. They argue about the business and personal topics, which often results in them yelling at and insulting each other. When they're on the phone, speakerphone, I usually go find chores to do or I go sit in another room because I don't want to listen to the arguments. My wife will get angry at me when I get up, calling me scared or a baby. When she gets off the phone, she will vent or complain to me about the conversation she's just had, and ultimately this leaves us with very little alone time together to talk about other topics. On top of that, I feel that she carries the rage or frustration into our personal life and snaps/yells at me in the same manner she's used to with her mother. I try my best to remain calm and help out with their business problems if possible, since I understand running a business can be extremely tiresome and stressful, but I don't see this ever going away between them since they talk this way about personal topics as well, and it seems like it's been this way even before the business. Any thoughts on how to help them improve their relationship, or for me to find a better way to deal with it? TL Doctor. My wife and Mill are on the phone constantly arguing and insulting each other, which causes my wife to act that way toward me, and I can't take it anymore. Let's cut to the chase. Your wife is an abusive person. No, she's not. She just. Yes, she is. My wife will get angry at me when I get up, calling me scared or a baby. Name calling and derision is one of the hallmarks of an abusive relationship. So is. She carries the rage or frustration into our personal life and snaps/yells at me in the same manner she's used to with her mother. Unrestrained and misdirected anger. Your wife is abusive. She is abusive toward her mother, and whether her mother is abusive back is no excuse, and she is abusive to you. So when you ask this, any thoughts on how to find a better way to deal with it? What you are actually asking is, how can I salvage this so that I can better cope with being in an abusive relationship? You don't cope with an abusive relationship, you leave an abusive relationship. And as for this, I don't see this ever going away between them since they talk this way about personal topics as well, and it seems like it's been this way even before the business. You're exactly correct. You will never ever be able to change the way they interact, because this is how they want to interact with one another. So this is how they are going to interact until one of them dies. And this is how your wife is going to treat you for as long as the relationship goes on. It's up to you whether you wish to remain to be abused or not. But those are your choices. There is no magical and she suddenly starts treating me well third option. Time for a come to Jesus talk with your wife and, later on, your mill. But wife first. Sit down and clearly articulate in written form what you are experiencing, feelings, examples, how it is affecting your relationship, etc. Give it a day or two, reread and write it over, adding or editing anything else you feel is of importance. Do this several times until you are satisfied with the tone and content. While this is going on, withdraw from interacting with either of them other than polite conversation, clearly signaling that something is changing. Include in your thoughts the outcome you desire from this conversation and how to achieve it. And of course, tell her how much you love her and how much she means to you. When you have your thoughts ready to be presented, sit her down and calmly share them, but ask her to please not interrupt or respond. Then ask her to sit down and do this process as well, clearly articulating the issues and outcomes she desires. Make a plan together, then start working on how to deal with mom. You and she need clear boundaries and tolerances on how to behave. They have been toxic for a long time, so she needs to be crystal clear in her process. Good luck, friend. This has worked for me and it can work for you. Again, counseling at some point may be necessary. It can only help. Was she like this before you got married? I would leave someone who treated me this terribly. I think at the very least you all need counseling. The fact that she calls you names when you try to remove yourself from the situation is abusive behavior. It's gotten much more frequent in the past year or so as their business has grown. She spends much more time with her mother both in person and on the phone now. I suppose that could be the reasoning for her increased irritability. Calling me scared or a baby. Just no. Stop trying to help with business problems unless and until she starts treating you like a cherished human being, not a mat upon which she can hurl her vitriol. If she rages, you might have the bad experience of picking a not very nice person to marry. This is not a mill issue. This is a wife issue. The best way to deal with it is start to deal with it head on. Boundaries are your friend. Use them. I have not read it, but the book Hold On to Your NUTS, Non-Negotiable, Unalterable Terms, comes recommended by some on men setting boundaries in marriage. Good luck. My wife will get angry at me when I get up, calling me scared or a baby. FYI, this is mild abuse, but abuse nonetheless. It's verbal abuse. It's not really up to us to rank it. There's no suffering Olympics. My 22F boyfriend, 27 meters, has never discussed the future with me after being together for 2.5 years. My boyfriend and I have been together for about 2.5 years and I adore him. He's the kindest person in the world, he's so caring and is good company. The issue is that, while we've been together for so long, we've never discussed a future with each other. While it's something that hasn't really bothered me much, I am thinking of moving next year, so I want to know what things are going to look like for us. He avoids any discussions about the future. I think he wants to settle into a permanent job first, as he's been struggling to get one and doesn't like to make any major decisions unless he's financially stable. Which is great and all, but anytime I mention the prospect of a future together, like where he'd like to live, where he sees himself, he's always like, I don't know, I haven't really thought out it. And brushes it off. I've brought deeper things up while I'm drunk before, like marriage and kids and living together, but he always acts weird and uncomfortable. But he still sees us together, things like maybe one Christmas. Or next summer. Like in the near future we'll be together, but not much mention of a future, if that makes sense. We've had to do long distance twice together already, once when he moved home to study, and another time for a while during the peak of the pandemic when I moved home because I lost my job. I don't want to do long distance again, and I really care about my career. I want to be successful in what I do and to not get stuck in one place so young. I want to ask my boyfriend to move with me, but I just know that he'll say no. Because of this I feel we're so distant as well. I go out a lot more than him. I've met all his friends, he's only met a small handful of mine. I invite him out but he says no. I suggest going on holidays, he says no. I like to take my time walking around and look at things, he gets frustrated when going out and wants to leave places as soon as possible. I like to go out, he likes to stay in and re-watch The Office for the millionth time. I'm just starting to feel dragged down now, and the issue is that I'm so scared of where a conversation about our future will go, because I swear if he says I don't know, I haven't thought about it, I'll lose it. Thing is, otherwise, he's a perfect person. He's so kind and gentle. I feel attractive to him, and I feel loved by him, but sometimes I don't feel wanted by him. I'm worried about speaking to him about stuff because he's quite insecure, and I'm worried he'll think I don't want to be with him when I do. I don't know if any of this makes sense, but I just feel sick right now. I almost feel selfish for wanting to focus on my career, but I know it's not. Too long didn't read. My boyfriend has avoided discussions about the future and I'm starting to feel dragged down by it.